Aquarian hat, cap phone, ball cap. Did y'all see our
So
text?
we left off at page 128, I believe. Let me just segue. On the 5th of October, the master returned once again to Ahmednagar at 1:30 in the afternoon, and again graced Mr. Sata's place near the cotton market, where it was already decided to halt for the rest of the day and then proceed to Aurangabad the following morning. A special seat was found to be gracefully prearranged for the master in the house. But mysteriously, the moment he sat upon it, he got up and betook himself to the little garden in front of the house, where he took his seat on a chair. In a second, the mystery got automatically unraveled. A car came dashing along the road, adjoining this garden, and stopped at a little distance away from where the master was seated. Again, Hazrat Babajan was occupying this car. Thus, the two masters had crossed each other twice within 48 hours at Ahmednagar, each coming from a long distance for some purpose best known to themselves. However, the master conveyed this much, quote, Babajan has come again and I have now become free, end quote, and canceled the original program of staying there the whole day. Accordingly, the party once again started that same afternoon for Aurangabad. It was nearly dusk when they crossed the river Godavari and entered His Eminent Highness the Nizam's dominion and stopped there within a distance of a mile from Mehrabad. Here the master instructed Ali Akbar, the Majnun, to retire, and then sent for Chota Baba and Mr. S.A. Abbas Kak, one of his deeply devoted Muslim disciples. But accompanying this pair, there came the least thought of, the most welcome person. It was none else but Ali, the hero. Marvin, could you continue with chapter 20, please?
Love triumphs again. Love had triumphed again. Almost the same hour that the master had conveyed the words, I have now become free, at Ahmednagar, that Ali had suddenly turned up at Toka. After taking him to Bombay at the end of the dramatic and unsuccessful second bid for freedom, his father had put Ali in a night school in Bombay near the JJ hospital so that he could personally keep watch over the slippery customer of a son during his schooling. As was likely to happen in view of the boy's love, distractions, and pangs of separations, he could make no headway in this school, where his class teacher could not help taking him for a regular dunce, and often used to threaten him with reports to his father regarding his great disregard and carelessness for his lessons. Although Ali now did not remain without food completely, as he did during the first short separation of 6 days, a slice or two of bread, a little butter, and tea every day were the only things that kept him going during this prolonged separation. The only enjoyment that the boy now used to indulge in daily was to buy some flowers, worth 6 to 8 annas, and lovingly put them over the gullah of Ismam Hussein in his father's shop. A cash box is called a gullah, and many Mohammedan houses and shops have such special boxes in which spare money is collected from time to time in the name of a saint, and then dispersed after ceremonies on this saint's birthday or death anniversary. Although Ali had not ceased to revere the great Muslim Imam, on the contrary, unlike the majority of his community, he also recognizes the illustrious Imam as one of the perfect masters of his age. But as a worthy spiritual aspirant that he is, he used to put these flowers on the box with the only thoughts of Hazrat Meher Baba. He knew well that his hostile surroundings would never allow him to remember the object of his heart in any other way. And so the love lost yet very intelligent little boy devised this fine and at the same time most significant way out for his feelings. Besides various other attempts that his father made in bringing round Ali to his own orthodox point of view, he once again tried to overawe Ali with pompous dignitaries and awe-inspiring officials when he took him forcibly into the presence of the president of the community and the Persian consul at Bombay. Even that traitor Jay was timely arranged to appear on the scene, but all their arguments, threats, and temptings once again proved fruitless. The inborn love in Ali made him face all of them bravely and unflinchingly. I wish the lad had hurled these handsome lines of the great Muslim mystic philosopher and poet Amir Khusrav against his too many interlocutors. And we have a saying which is, I am the infidel begotten of love, who does not care for religion. Every vein in my body having become a sacred thread, I am not in need of one. The 11th hour of failure had, in spite of all desires for an escape, made Ali pessimistic in that connection. The exact date is not remembered by the boy, but from his surmises, it comes to 21st of September, the day on which the master took a bath and had a change of linen after 18 days, that Ali saw a brief but very significant dream. He dreamt that night that the master was dressed in dirty and torn clothes. During this peculiar non-bathing period, the master's apparently unclean white robe was also torn a bit, and looked at him very eagerly and invitingly. This little vision was enough to thrill the hero with fresh energy and hope for the third attempt. The letter, dated 24th of September, already reproduced in the last chapter, speaks the rest of his plans and feelings in this connection. The very day that the master left Toka, Ali finally decided also upon an escape, which he effected the next day. Thus, on the 4th of October, according to the deliberate plan, which also included a good sleep, the boy, for the first time during this second separation, went to sleep soundly at 10 o'clock that morning in his father's shop near Paidownie, Bombay, after carefully instructing a servant to wake him up at 12. Punctual to the instruction, the servant roused him up. The next item of this peculiar program of the boy was to take a bath, change his clothes, and do full justice to bread and butter. And Ali, after refreshing his strained nerves with a long-last sound sleep, went through all the other details as above to the last particulars. Those concerned were very pleased with this remarkable return of Ali to normal life, unsuspecting the venturesome intentions underlying this light activity. I want to go to the Karnak Bunder's shop, said he to the guards placed upon him by his relentless father, who, finding the boy so sweetly reasonable that day, readily consented, but were careful enough to accompany him. Thus the boy, whom a certain section of the Indian Penal Code had reduced to an abject slave, began to walk under the strict surveillance of his constant guards toward Karnak Bunder. In
Thanks,
spite of
Thanks, Marvin. Ernie, please.
In spite of an inborn optimism, the boy now suddenly felt a shock of doubt regarding his success. And so he went straight to a bookseller's shop and bought a copy of the works of Hafiz. In order that the reader may appreciate this strange act of Ali, I think it necessary to introduce Khwaja Shams ud-Din Hafiz Shirazi, that perfect master and great poet of Persia, in his true colors, and to briefly touch upon the facts that concern the subject in question. The name Hafiz needs no introduction in the world of literature as a poet, but he is also popularly believed to be a saint in the Mohammedan countries. However, there are very few who know him as one of the kutubs or sadgurus of his age. There are many who have tried to attribute his spiritual significance and mystical meanings to his rich poetry, but according to the master, Hafiz had laid bare all the 7 spiritual planes in his odes for those who, again in the words of the master, as well as Shams-i-Tabriz, Jalal-ud-Din Rumi, and Hugo of St. Victor, had got the third eye, or eye of the heart, inward sense, and the eye of soul, respectively. The commonest miracle attributed to this master in many countries of the East is the accurate power of predicting events and unraveling mysteries that are believed to be possessed by the book of his divine poem, the Divan-i-Hafiz. According to one of his life sketches written by Mirza Fasullah Khan of Relu, when the dispute arose over the performance of religious rituals in connection with Khwaja Hafiz's own funeral, the contending parties agreed to abide by the answer that his own divan would give out. And when the book was opened at random, lo, it contained 2 lines which appeared as if Khwaja Sahib had pre-written for this very occasion. Since that time, he came to be known as Lisanul Kahib, that is, the tongue of the unknown. Among the Mughal emperors of India, Humayun and Jahangir were great believers in Hafiz, and the predictions conveyed by his divan, the copy of the divan, which they used to refer to for this purpose, is still preserved in a library at Bankapur and bears some reference as to certain foretellings, together with the dates in their own royal handwritings. To give a fresh example of this peculiar power of Hafiz's poetry, to pick up the last point of this narrative itself, After purchasing the book, Ali sincerely invoked the help of Khwaja Sahib and opened the book to set his sudden shock of doubt at rest. The divan's foretold success. All his misgivings disappeared at this divine prediction into thin air, and the hero resumed his prearranged tactics. He had already created a great confidence in his guards, and the purchase had added another good impression upon them. Thus, the more reasonably he behaved with them, the greater freedom the guards allowed Ali. They perhaps thought the black magic had at last outrun its course, since it is on record that even these orthodox moguls are fully alive to the great effect of love on the boys, but their age-long prejudices have made them attribute it to black magic, and consequently many queer tales have penetrated into Mehrabad about the funny anecdotes experimented upon the poor souls, making their sufferings more piquant. Abiding his time carefully, Ali somehow managed to get 10 minutes of freedom from surveillance, and in the space of this short time, at last, he managed to reach the Victoria terminus. He had timed well his escape, and so had not to wait long in suspense. As soon as he boarded the Nagpur mail, the fast train dashed out of Bombay. Ali still held the Divan Hafiz tightly clasped against his heart, as if it were a charm against unexpected accidents. But within a few minutes run of the fast-going train, just as it passed the new Sandhurst bridge station, Ali got a shock. It was, however, a very pleasant one. All of a sudden, the master had restored him the sight. To go into the technique of the varying degrees of this inner faculty of sight, which is called tahur in tasawwuf, is to start quite a new subject altogether. Suffice it to say that this time Ali began to experience a state of unity and diversity. In every object, the boy later on told the writer, I saw the master. For instance, if he looked at a tree, in every leaf of it, he beheld none but his beloved Baba. No wonder that in this state of bliss and ecstasy, he found no longer any use for the book he had so long in his hands and without meaning. In any disrespect, the boy soon hurled it clean out of the onrushing train.
Thank you, Ernie. Mayhair, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Any distressed, the boy soon hurled it clean out the on-rushing train. Ali left the Nagpur mail at Manad Junction and took the train for Dhun. He got down at Belapur, the nearest but out of the way the station, took a Toka and managed to get a lift in a motor bus for Nevasa, which is the chief town of this part of the district and is only a few miles from Toka. So far all went well with him and the sight too remained unchanged. But as soon as he arrived at Nevasa, a local Pathan recognized him and began to accuse him for having absconded again. No, I have not absconded. My brother is with me, replied Ali. The threatening Pathan, continuing to gain time and avoiding him immediate arrest. Where is your brother? Personally inquired the very suspicious Pathan. For a moment, the boy was non-puzzled, but quickly thought for a plan, and said, my brother is coming via Ahmednagar. Is coming via Ahmednagar, and you will presently see him. At last, till the buses arrived at Nevasa on the way to Toka from Ahmednagar, Ali thought he had succeeded in avoiding an arrest. Perhaps he had thought of giving the slip to the Pathan at right moment. But now another nightmare loomed large before Ali. What if his father were to come by one of those buses? So when the bus came, Ali slipped away in the surrounding bushes on one pretext or the other and began to watch for a dreadful advent of his father. But instead of his father, the boy saw with a high of relief that one of the passengers was Mr. K.J. Dastur. As luck would have it, the gentleman happened to be returning to Toka that very day after a short private visit to Bombay, and thus provided the brother for Ali to point out to the inquisitive Pathan. The rest is already known to the readers. But I would add that there was no demonstration on the return of the hero. This time, just as the attempts were made to bring round his father, After seeing Ali, the master proceeded towards Aurangabad, sending the hero back to the colony. But the party did not actually reach the destination for certain reason. The master returned to Taka the following morning, 6th October, after passing a night under a wayside shelter.
Continue with chapter 21, please.
Okay,
Mayor.
fresh flow of spirituality. We have seen that unlike the disturbance caused in the Meher ashram at the first post removed for Ali, in the course of the second separation, neither the master looked worried nor the great revival of the spiritual love and devotion amongst the boys suffered in way. On the contrary, the last three chapters show that the second blaze of the spirit of spirituality, particularly in the original section of the institution, went on soaring higher and higher, that produced many a new candidate for the Prem Ashram sections. But it was the return of the hero that proved that the second period of absence was not without consequence, since from the very next day of Ali's arrival, the master adopted quite unprecedented course of working. He became lost to all save the Prem Ashram. For 10 days and nights, from the fourth day of Ali's return, the master did not even step out of the Prem Ashram boundary. From dawn till dark, save the hours of 12 to 2, throughout the dark, cold nights, His Holiness was seen working with a Venginess of the Prem Ashram in minutes, and the same time continuing the fasting system that he had adopted since the 10th September, thus without taking food. Himself, His Holiness served out the meals in imits every day. He would be annoyed to discuss even for a few minutes on subjects other than the Prem Ashram. Whenever the different workers approached him for advice on some urgent question concerning other affairs of the colony, but he used to give lengthy discourses on love, on God, on spiritual path for hours together to the Prem Ashram boys, twice, thrice, and even 4 times a day. Besides, he used to instruct them on various methods of meditation, concentration suitable to individual tenderness.
Thank you so much, Maher. Rolf,
Welcome.
Rolf, are you reading today? I guess no, Rolf. How about Joy?
Oh, I was muted.
Oh,
I'm
go ahead
sorry.
then, Ralph. Sorry, Joy.
I can read a little bit. I'm sorry. I forgot I was muted. A God-realized personality never sleeps. There is nothing like sleep for him, as he sleeps soundly in the ordinary working state too. but a perfect master takes rest all the same. That is, goes into the resting state, which is a point just between the sixth and seventh spiritual planes. But during the period mentioned above, the master seldom took rest. He would keep moving amongst the boys all throughout the night, seeing for himself how they followed the instructions and helping them whenever necessary. Again, when the boys engaged themselves in the daily recreation or secular studies during the day, again during the day, Baba would constantly remain in their presence and take an equally keen and lively interest in all their games and studies, while during the short intervals, His Holiness would make the boys sit around him and enjoy with them divine songs through Urdu, Persian, Marathi, and English records of famous singers on the gramophone. In short, His Holiness used to remain all absorbed in the affairs of the little ones for every second of their time, and thus always gave his physical presence before one or the other or all of the Prem Ashram boys. It was a novel atmosphere, as it was only in the evening that the rest of the Meher Ashram boys and other disciples and devotees could see His Holiness when they were allowed to come to him to pay their usual daily respects. Even then, none of them would be allowed to stay after 8:30 p.m. Thus, the hitherto unchallenged privilege of every disciple to call at the master's seat and sit beside him whenever he liked to do so, provided he was off duty, was for the time being suspended. Consequently, the half an hour or so at their disposal every evening was hardly sufficient to enable the large number of the disciples and devotees to go through the formalities of paying their respects. And so none felt having in, and so none felt having enjoyed the inspiring company of His Holiness. And so none felt having enjoyed the inspiring company of His Holiness. Nay, even this half an hour's grace to the disciples did not appear to have been allowed by the Master quite freely, as he generally seemed to be preoccupied and at times unconscious of the surroundings in the gross sense. But the bodily seclusion of the Master within a fixed time was not a new experience for the disciples. Even while remaining in a small room for 108 days last year. His Holiness, however, was accessible to anyone at any time and thus continued making his presence felt amongst all, and also kept on taking interest in the rest of the affairs. But this time the master seemed to have secluded himself in the spirit too. And therefore, when His Holiness came out of the Prem-ashram boundary and partook of food after 42 days on the 23rd of October, it made no difference in the atmosphere.
Thank you,
Although
Ralph.
now, okay.
Thank you,
So,
Ralph. Joyce, please.
Although now he once began to move about freely, he might be said to have maintained his retreat all the more rigidly, because 2 days prior to his coming out, His Holiness had entrusted sole powers of administration of the colony and all its affairs to Mr. R.K. Irani. All the inhabitants of Mehrabad were ordered to obey Mr. Irani in all matters and forbidden to approach the master under any circumstances. Even the new administrator, Mr. Irani himself, was forbidden to speak on any affairs of the colony with the master and was ordered to manage affairs according to his own discretion. Thus, divesting himself completely of the administration of Mehrabad and getting absolutely free from all engagements from the 23rd of October, the master continued working exclusively for the Prem-ashram for 1 month. Consequently, it was no wonder to hear great changes towards spiritual advancement having come over the lucky inmates. 1 meal a day and 3 hours of sleep at night proved to be sufficient for most of them for maintaining their physiques in a prime condition without feeling like they were undergoing any privations. It must not be supposed that they devoted their entire time solely to meditation and thus kept themselves drugged with concentration so as to forget or lose the normal craving for food and sleep, or that they created any unnatural stupor within them. If the master inspired them to meditate with all the seriousness at his command, if he delivered before them the spiritual lectures with serene solemnity, His Holiness was no less cheerful and convivial in encouraging them to enjoy their daily recreations. With beaming eyes and smiling expressions, he used to take the boys every morning to the fine bathing ghats along the river Godavari, where they were taught to swim. He did not only encourage, but would insist upon all to have a go at a dive and enjoy the dip. Even Chota Baba, a fine swimmer himself, played no small part in training the boys to swim. With a will and vim of his own, it did not take him long to make them all swim gracefully in the Godavari. Consequently, when ripples were seen in the river, ripples of boyish joy and glee were also heard freely in the air about the spot where the Prem-ashram boys enjoyed themselves. In November, the master again struck a new note. His Holiness began to complain constantly about the climate of Toka for a number of times a day. It was a fact that with the advent of the winter, the climate began to get decidedly nasty. The majority of the boys of both the sections of the ashram and a good many disciples were attacked with cold and cough, which would yield to no treatment successfully. The remarks repeated by the master now and then in this connection forewarned most of the disciples about some still more drastic changes. And so when the master openly announced on the 18th of November his decision to remove back to the original site of Mehrabad near the village of Erangan, only a few were surprised at this. But the fact that, except the selected boys, all the rest were to be sent away to their respective places on vacation appeared very strange. However strange be the command, the disciples have had enough experience and are convinced of the selfless motives of His Holiness to obey him first and ask questions afterwards. Accordingly, steps were at once taken to comply with the master's wish. All the boys except the Prem Ashram inmates were offered to betake themselves home, pending the completion of the new arrangement at Erangan. Under normal circumstances, it is doubtful whether even a few of them would have preferred a holiday at home to the master's company. But the recent withdrawal of His Holiness for a month from amongst them had also prepared them for the separation, and the majority readily fell in with the suggestion. The same day, a batch of 7 boys, went away. The following morning, 18 more followed suit, but it was in the evening that the real reason of this upheaval came to light. Ali's father appeared again at Toka to claim him. That he did not come earlier, he said, was due to ill health, and so his silence for a month and a half was no consent. On the contrary, he declared his firm resolve to take Ali away. There was no longer any legal or moral binding. Still, the authorities tried to induce the gentleman to leave Ali alone. But it goes without saying that no persuasions could succeed. And the gentleman took him away for the 3rd time on the 20th of November. It is now become as clear as daylight that the unprecedented fast workings of the master in the Prem Ashram were really a race with time to achieve certain internal results before Ali was taken away, and that the master was prepared in advance for this 3rd exit of Ali. As it has been mentioned in chapter 2, the institution began with 10 Hindu boys. It would not be inappropriate to mention at this juncture that the number of boys on the 18th of November, 1928 was 102 as follows.
Thank you, Joy. Betty, please. Oh, start again, please, Betty, and this time unmute.
Okay. All right. Hindus. 11 Brahmins, 1 Jain Marwadi, 1 Sonar, 15 Marathas, 2 Shimpis, 1 Purdeshi, 15 Marmangs, 3 Shambars. The total is 49. Musulmans, that would be Muslims, 6 Mughals, 5 Deccanese, 6 Mughals, 2 Bahoris, 2 Kutchis, 5 foreigners, 20 total. Zoroastrians, 6 Parsis, 26 Iranis, 32 total. Christians, 1 Indian, 1. Total 102. Chapter 22. the pulsating impulse. In 20 days after Ali's third exit, as if by a magic wand, the Meher Ashram was completely reestablished at its original site near the village of Arangan, and the general situation was restored to its previous condition in every detail. The only important change brought about the institution was with regard to the secular education imparted therein. Viz, what is that? Instead of the matriculation examination course, English alone was decided to be taught to the Ashramites, the spiritual side being, of course, maintained without any change. The parents and guardians of the boys who had been sent home on leave were communicated with and asked to send in their boys, provided they had no objection whatsoever to this change. The popularity of the Meher Ashram in general and the attraction it possessed for its inmates in particular may well be judged from the circumstances that, in spite of being left completely free from the direct influence of the master and enjoying a holiday at home without any disciplinary restraints, the majority of the boys literally began to rush back to the institution at first opportunity, and their parents and guardians showed no less confidence toward it, as in view of the great change effected in the material side of the training in the Meher Ashram, they nevertheless willingly allowed their boys to rejoin it. It was therefore no wonder that each day in the second week of December saw a number of youngsters returning to Mehrabad with their guardians or with their written consent. But instead of the boy whose presence and absence meant so much to the Meher Ashram, it was his father who had came rushing back to Mehrabad on the 13th of December in search of Ali, who, he said, had again slipped away. After being taken away for the third time, Ali was put into a school near Sandhurst Bridge at Bombay, under a constant and careful watch and ward. In spite of it, he managed to slip away in the afternoon of the 12th of December during a recess period, and the sight of the school helped him to make short work of his dash for the Victoria terminus. Not knowing at what moment he might get an opportunity for escape, Ali had well studied the railway timetables, and so finding the Pune Express ready by the platform, he at once decided upon a plan. In order to get as many miles as possible between himself and Bombay, he came by this train to Lonavala, which is a hill station 80 miles from Bombay, passing a few pleasant hours as a welcome guest of one of the local disciples of the master. He came to the station to board the Madras mail, which leaves Lonavala at about 12:45 a.m. But for a single carriage, all the other third-class compartments in the train were found to be overcrowded, and so he jumped into the former, which was the single carriage. He was naturally in the best of spirits at this juncture, and when a fellow passenger inquired as to what station it was, Ali literally shouted out that it was Lonavala. But at that same moment, he happened to see, to his horror, his own father in the very compartment, trying to locate the direction from whence came the familiar voice. The pulsating impulse. Of course, Ali was out of the carriage with a bound through the opposite door, landing on the other side of the train, and under cover of darkness made his good escape. It was therefore no mystery that Mr. Haji Muhammad did not find Ali at Mehrabad that day. Probably it was due to sheer exasperation that the gentleman, before beating a retreat, asked the ashram authorities to readmit Ali in the institution when he returned, and also gave a fresh promise not to disturb him again. Having escaped from the grasp of his father in the nick of time, Ali preferred to remain at Lonavala for another 24 hours and arrived at Mehrabad on the following day to hear the good news that once again his father had consented to let him remain in the ashram. His father was duly informed about his arrival and readmission to the Meher ashram. But the most remarkable return to the institution at this juncture was that of Ahmed Mohammed, one of those boys who had been taken away with Ali on the 19th of August from Toka. In spite of their best attempts during 4 months, his relatives could not succeed in making him forget his Baba. To the contrary, on Sunday, the 23rd of December, Ahmed had suddenly a great impulse to return to the master. And since the way in which he put his impulse into action provides a fresh, tangible interpretation of the sobs and throbs, I would describe it fully. Without providing himself with a bedding, food, or money, he simply started off for Ahmednagar on foot that very day. He began by selling the 3 silver buttons in his shirt to 3 annas to a stranger, and came to Dadar by tram, paying 1 anna as the fare. With just those 2 remaining annas and the clothes on his body, he set out on the tramp in the scorching sun of that Sunday afternoon. He had walked about 12 to 14 miles when it became quite dark. Being quite inexperienced, he did not think of stopping in a village in time, and had thus no other alternative but that of passing the night where he was. Thinking a tree to be safer, he climbed one along the road and made himself where is he now? And made him
Top line.
sorry, I can't see this. Made himself
Whoops.
let's see. Okay. Oh, made himself as comfortable under their circumstances as possible. It goes without saying that he did not at all sleep soundly throughout the night, since a branch of a tree to lie on, the clouds and the sky as the only covering, and the lone spot on the highway in the wintry night, is not quite a comfortable situation to induce sound sleep. On the contrary, the very fact that the boy could somehow pass the night under such circumstances speaks for the motive force behind this apparently offhand venture on his part. The bullock carts, as is well known, generally begin to move about very early in the morning, and are, as a rule, the first to rumble on a road. Hence, it was still very dark when some passing carts announced the dawn of a new day to Ahmed. He climbed down from his perch and began to follow the carts. By sunrise, Master Ahmed reached Thana. Having only 2 annas about him, he dared not spend more than 2 paisa for the breakfast, and so had to satisfy himself with a few cold, crisp biscuits and a handful of water. Thus refreshed, this little lover of Baba continued his tramp. Nearing Panvel, a Mussulman innkeeper, taking pity on the lonely and haggard-looking boy, offered to help him by getting him a lift in one of the passing motor buses.
Thanks, Betty. Mahu, please.
Oops, sorry. Oops. A bus, right?
Uh-huh.
But
Okay. But as he still had sufficient energy to carry on, he politely, but in no uncertain terms, refused the offer. At noon, he reached Panvel, feeling very hungry, as needs he must have been after walking for so long and having had no food save those few biscuits during the last 24 hours, but viewing the contents of the poor purse, he had to remain content with 2 pies worth of sweets. A little rest under the shade of a tree, however, made him take to the road again. When to the lack of food, want of sleep, and absence of many more comforts which a human being requires in the ordinary course of his life, the scorching sun was added. Ahmed found it too much for his great determination after having walked some 8 or 9 miles more. His soul still wanted to strive on, but after all, the soul was caged in a small little body that could stand the strain no longer. He began to appeal for a lift to every motorist that passed, though it was all a cry in the wilderness. But perseverance succeeds. The 10th car that stopped in response to his hoarse shout belongs to a European gentleman going to Pune. Grasping the helplessness of the boy and his apparently hopeless task of covering the rest of the 63 miles to Pune on foot, the gentleman was kind enough to bring Ahmed in his car to Pune. This was something beyond the wildest dreams for Ahmed to reach Pune so soon. And this God-sent encouragement infused a new energy into him to face another cold night on a starvation diet consisting of a handful of nuts, which he bought for 1 pice. First, he tried to sleep on a bench along a public road, but the cold winds sent shivers through his poorly protected body, and so he made himself as snug as possible in the corner of a building and somehow passed the second night half dozing and half sleeping. At daybreak on Tuesday, Ahmed picked up his courage to start again on the tramp. It was now nearly 40 hours that he had not partaken of any food worth the name. Still, his first thought was to pay his respects to the master of his master, Her Holiness Hazrat Babajan of Pune. He also knew the grave risk he was running by going to Hazrat Babajan's place, as there are a number of Mughal tea shops in that vicinity. Still, he wound his way as cautiously as possible and came near the seat of Hazrat Babajan. Her Holiness was to all appearances sleeping at that time, with the coverings well wrapped all round her person. But the moment Ahmed quietly bowed towards her from a distance, she gave him a look of love by suddenly taking her august head out of the coverings. And no sooner Ahmed had experienced a wonderful thrill of a miracle, Her Holiness put herself under cover and to a casual observer went to sleep again. Here was another encouragement for the little lover to go on with his labor of love. Now he bought a little bread for 2 pies and started from Pune, eating the breakfast while walking on towards the node along the railway lines.
Thank you, Mahu. Marian, please.
About the 12th mile, probably to avoid the monotonous atmosphere of the railway lines, Ahmed again took to the public road. But the impulse that brought him on this public road seems more to have been a subtle inspiration from the master, who wanted to provide him with food, as Ahmed very soon overtook an old man on the road going along the same direction. He was an old Hindu and Ahmed was a little Mughal. But the psychology of human affinity under circumstances of common suffering and hardships knows no man-made laws. The two became friends. The old man, being experienced, soon decided to halt for the hottest hours under the shade of a tree. He not only induced Ahmed to follow suit, but also made him share his bread and chutney freely. And thus, after 48 hours, Ahmed got something substantial to eat. In the afternoon, this queer pair started again. By dusk, they reached a village where the old Hindu, after advising Ahmed to take shelter in the village mosque, went away to some other place. Ahmed was allowed by the mosque people to sleep in the premises, and thus he got a good shelter on the third night. Still, through lack of covering and bedding in the cold of the night, he could not sleep well, and it did not require an effort on his part to get up long before the sun rose over the village. With a number of dogs barking after him and fumbling here and there in the dark, Ahmed somehow reached the main road and began his tramp again on that Wednesday morning. He felt very hungry that day, as he had a spare meal since he started on Sunday, and consequently found the tramp very trying. He tried to get a lift once again in the passing motor vehicles, but none helped him. And perforce, the poor boy had to take recourse to the tamarind trees along the road. Eating the leaves and tamarins, he somehow walked about 16 miles and reached the railway station of Patas. He found himself dog-tired and as hungry as a wolf. Still, after a little rest, through sheer force of will, he walked 6 more miles along the railway lines and reached the station of Dahond. He tried to sleep on the platform benches of the station and forget the great fire of hunger raging within him. But as was likely to happen, he could not rest, far short of getting a nap. For the first time, he could think of begging and approached a Musalman gentleman with a request for some food. The latter at once conducted him to the refreshment room and ordered rice and curry for him. In order to avoid meat, he surprised his benefactor by preferring to partake of only tea and bread. Thus refreshed, Ahmed fell for the first time into a sound sleep in the warm atmosphere of the station premises. But he was not destined to enjoy it for long. Soon a policeman came along and drove him out of the station. Ahmed passed the rest of the night under a staircase near the station, where the master comforted him with his holy presence in a dream. On the following morning, Thursday, while inquiring for the road to Ahmednagar, someone suggested to him to go by train without a ticket. But he evaded the suggestion and continued the tramp along the railway lines. He kept on walking for the whole of that day in the sun without food, and halted at a wayside station which he reached by sunset. Hence, no wonder that he felt very hungry. However, he had no need to beg again for food. An old lady on the platform, probably a passenger waiting for the train, provided him with an unsolicited square meal. Having been driven from the platform in the dead of the night at dawn, Ahmed again thought of a tree to sleep. But he soon had to climb down on account of a nightmare, which made him think that a black snake was about the tree. It was then nearly midnight, and the cold, screeching winds were too much to bear in the open air. So he tried to make a fire. He gathered up some straw and dried leaves about the place, but to his great disappointment found that the matches he had bought at Tahana would not ignite through wear and tear. In such a situation, he dared to take refuge again on the station, where happily he was allowed to pass the remainder of the night. On Friday, the 6th day, Ahmed restarted on his sacred journey at daybreak. Eating the jawari plants from the adjoining fields whenever he felt a great pinch of hunger, he kept on walking briskly till he came in sight of the Meher ashram, which was still some miles ahead. He once more begged, not for food, but for some flowers from a gardener. The master is not only well known, but is held in great reverence by the surrounding village people. And thus, when the gardener came to know for whom the boy wanted the flowers, he presented Ahmed with handfuls of wild roses. The lovelorn lad forgot all about his great fatigue and hunger in the joy of preparing a crown out of those flowers for the king of his heart. And thus it was nearly sunset, and the master was seated amongst some disciples near the very crypt of a room in which His Holiness had confined himself last year, that a boy suddenly crept in unannounced, and before anyone could even recognize him, had fixed a wreath of roses on the golden ringlets of His Holiness. I, for one, could not place the haggard and hollow-eyed face in my memory at the moment until I was actually told that it was Master Ahmed.
Thanks, Marion. Great place to pick up next week.
Okay.